In the 70s, Japan mastered the art of stealth speed. Cars that blended into traffic but left rivals in the dust. No noise, no flash, just hidden firepower. These are the 25 unknown Japanese sleeper cars of the 1970s. Let's jump in. Number 25. 1975 Nissan Stanza 1600 GX. From the outside, it looked like something a school principal might drive. Boxy, responsible, utterly forgettable. But this next machine, tucked under that plain sheet metal, had just enough bite to humble cars twice its reputation. Built on Nissan's lesser-known A10 platform, the 1975 1600 GX was part of the Violet series, an oddball caught between economy and ambition. It wasn't the top-tier Bluebird, and it didn't pretend to be. But Nissan quietly gave it just enough muscle to make people blink twice. Under the hood, a rev-happy 1.6-liter L16 engine pushing out 95 horsepower and 94 pound-feet of torque. Modest on paper, sure, but paired with a lightweight body and a tight 4-speed manual, it could lurch off the line and pull 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 11 seconds. Not blistering by today's standards, but in mid-70s suburban Japan, it was sneaky fast. The 1600 GX trim wasn't all badges either. It had sportier suspension tuning, dual carburetors, and, crucially, less weight to carry around than its siblings. That gave it an edge in corners and quick bursts of acceleration, especially when lined up against domestic rivals that looked faster than they actually were. The GX felt alive above 3,500 RPM, rewarding drivers who knew how to keep it on the boil. On tight roads, it could embarrass bigger, thirstier machines, but not everything was golden. The styling was forgettable at best, another bland 3-box sedan in a sea of similar shapes. Inside, it was functional but uninspired, with plastic trim and minimal driver engagement, unless you were really pushing it. And the moment you popped the hood and saw L16, instead of something more intimidating, most gearheads would turn away. That's exactly why it worked. This was a car that thrived on being underestimated. It didn't need wide fenders or racing stripes. It needed an open stretch of road and someone who understood what it could really do. It was a mechanic's special, a cult favorite, and a sleeper in the truest sense. And just when you think you figured out Nissan's game, the next car on the list shifts the story again. This one's got an even quieter voice and a far meaner punch. Number 24. 1973 Mitsubishi Galant 2000 SL. The last car may have looked like a secretary's runabout, but this next one, it wore a suit, kept its head down, and punched way above its weight class when no one was watching. At first glance, the 1973 Mitsubishi Galant 2000 SL looked like corporate wallpaper. Straight lines, chrome trim, polite proportions. It was the kind of car parked outside middle management offices, shuttling company men between meetings. But Mitsubishi had quietly slipped in a wild card, a bigger engine meant for bigger things. Beneath its mild-mannered exterior sat a 2.0-liter Saturn inline-4, producing 115 horsepower and around 119 pound-feet of torque. Not outrageous numbers, but crucially, it delivered them with urgency and a surprisingly wide power band. The 2000 SL wasn't the fire-breathing GTO GSR version, but that's what makes it interesting. It shared the same platform, and the engine wasn't far off. The key difference? The body. This wasn't a sports coupe. It was a clean-cut 4-door sedan, the kind that wouldn't raise eyebrows in a company parking lot. And yet, in the right hands, it could sprint to 60 miles per hour in under 10.5 seconds, enough to keep up with bigger, pricier imports from the US and Europe. Throw it into a corner, and it didn't protest like a lazy commuter car. It responded tightly, like it had something to prove. What made the SL variant so special was its subtlety. No rear spoiler, no racing stripes, just a tasteful badge and a quiet growl when you push the throttle. It was the kind of car your dad might have driven, until someone tried to race him at a red light and ended up trailing its taillights. Of course, it wasn't perfect. The cabin felt dated even by early 70s standards, and the steering could be vague at speed. The weight distribution wasn't ideal either. Up front, it felt heavier than it should have. But none of that mattered to those who knew its secret. This car could run. It was the kind of sleeper that survived by keeping its mouth shut. And just when you think Mitsubishi had no more surprises left, the next entry steps in with a badge you think you know, but specs you definitely don't. Number 23, 1974 Toyota Corona RT104 2000 GT. If the Galant 2000 SL was the polite office worker with a secret hobby, this next one was the neighborhood uncle, always around, always quiet, until someone brought up the performance. Then his eyes lit up. At face value, the 1974 Toyota Corona RT104 2000 GT didn't stand out. It was a staple of middle-class Japan, known more for reliability than speed, a car you'd expect to find outside a pharmacy, not tailing a Skyline through mountain passes. But the 2000 GT badge on this one wasn't just for show. Toyota quietly fitted it with the same 2.0-liter 18RG twin-cam engine that powered sportier Celicas and Carinas. An underrated gem that spun freely and delivered 130 horsepower and around 123 pound-feet of torque. That's a healthy bump over the usual Corona fare, especially in a car that looked like this pedestrian. With its modest grille, squared-off taillights, and conservative stance, the RT104 looked like a family car. And it was. But it also happened to do 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 9.8 seconds, which put it in the same ring as some European compacts twice the price and prestige. The 2000 GT trim brought more than just power. It had stiffer suspension, better gearing, and a dash layout that felt just a bit more driver-focused than the economy trims. Yet from the sidewalk, nobody would ever guess. No scoops, no fender flares, no aggression. Just a quiet, confident sedan that could surprise anything from a Datsun 260Z to an Alfa Romeo GT Jr., especially when driven hard. Still, it wasn't without flaws. The steering felt numb under pressure, and the rear end could get squirrely on imperfect roads. It also didn't help that the GT badge was shared across multiple Toyota models, muddying its identity. Was it a performance car or just a trim package? Most dismissed it as the latter, and that's where they went wrong. Because under that dull beige paint and vinyl roof was something Toyota didn't talk much about. A genuine backroad performer with nothing to prove. And just when you think Toyota had played all its hands, the next car shows up with even less flash and just enough fury to rewrite the rules again. Number 22. 1977 Nissan Laurel 2000 SGX C130. If the Corona 2000 GT was the quiet uncle with a past, then what comes next is the uncle's older brother, more refined, more composed, but not someone you'd ever want to challenge in a straight line. The 1977 Nissan Laurel 2000 SGX C130 looked like it belonged in a tax accountant's driveway or parked at a wedding hall, blending in perfectly with its understated chrome details, conservative silhouette, and dignified presence. But hidden beneath all that calm was a surprising amount of muscle. Nissan outfitted the SGX trim with the 2.0-liter L20E inline 6, one of their early fuel-injected engines. It made around 130 horsepower and 130 pound-feet of torque, respectable for a car its size and whisper quiet in operation. This was no sports car, but it had poise. It could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in roughly 10 seconds. Not earth-shattering, but a quiet threat in an era where most sedans were barely crawling into the double digits. And unlike flashier cars of the time, the Laurel didn't advertise what it could do. No racing stripes, no wild wheels, just long body lines, soft leather, and a hint of menace if you look too long at the dual headlights. But the best part? It shared chassis DNA with the Skyline of the era. So while the Laurel wasn't tuned like a GTR, it had similar bones. Swap the tires, maybe the springs, and suddenly this polite sedan started behaving like something that didn't belong in the slow lane. Of course, it wasn't perfect. The Laurel learned more luxury than raw performance. Its weight dulled some of its athletic potential, and it was tuned for comfort first. But that's what made it the perfect sleeper. It didn't try to be a sports car. It was too busy being better than one, quietly. Number 21. 1975. Nissan Sunny Excellent 1400 GXPB 210. From the outside, it looked like every other compact car pulling into a suburban driveway. Modest, boxy, and built for practicality. But behind the wheel, things were different. Sharper, punchier, and far more alive than you'd expect. This was the 1975 Nissan Sunny Excellent 1400 GX PB 210. A car that kept its cards close to the chest until the road begged for more. Born from Nissan's ambition to inject new life into its Sunny lineup, the Excellent was a step above. While the standard Sunny B210S were focused on efficiency and affordability, the PB210 chassis brought with it a unique trick, a 1.4 LL14 engine, pulled straight from a larger platform. That meant 95 horsepower in a car weighing under 900 kilograms. Suddenly, your mild-mannered commuter had real teeth. The twin-carb setup gave it crisp throttle response and surprising mid-range torque for a car of its class. Nearly 115 Newton-meters, putting it well ahead of the economy crowd. While not built for drag strips, the 0 to 60 mile per hour sprint in just under 11 seconds felt quick when paired with the light, responsive chassis and nimble suspension. You could hustle it through corners and leave heavier, more bloated sedans second-guessing their footing. But what really made the 1400 GX a sleeper was how stealthy it looked. No flared fenders, no racing stripes, just the subtle GX badging, slightly wider steel wheels, and a keen eye would notice the tachometer tucked into the dashboard. That was it. Everything else screamed, "I'm just here to pick up the groceries." Yet it had the lungs to run with some of the best compacts of the decade. It never tried to be flashy, and that was its genius. It blended into traffic, disappeared into parking lots, and still had enough grit to go head-to-head with cars carrying twice the attitude. The sunny, excellent 1400 GX didn't shout, it whispered, and that whisper was often fast enough to leave others in the dust. Number 20, 1977. Toyota Carina 2000 GT. That last Corolla was all bark hidden under a beige sweater. But what if the next one didn't bark at all, just calmly walked past you while secretly holding a black belt? The 1977 Toyota Carina 2000 GT was a lesson in misdirection. It looked like it had somewhere sensible to be, parent-teacher meetings, maybe a late-night pharmacy run. But under that upright conservative shell sat a 2.0-liter 18R G-twin cam heart, tuned for 130 horsepower and capable of a brisk 0 to 60 miles per hour time in the high 8-second range. That's knocking on the doors of European sports sedans twice the price. Unlike the Celica or the more flamboyant coupes, the Carina wore no muscle. It was narrow, boxy, and softly sprung, but it was lighter than you'd expect and far more balanced in the corners. With McPherson struts up front and semi-trailing arms in the rear, it could surprise more than just muscle cars. It had enough composure to unsettle an Alfa on a Sunday drive, and thanks to its high-revving engine, it didn't just move quickly, it felt alive doing it. The name Carina rarely stirred up excitement. It was meant to sit between the more exciting Celica and the practical Corona. But the 2000 GT trim, offered quietly in Japanese showrooms, was a wolf pretending to be an office clerk. It even came with a 5-speed manual, rare in a car that looked built to cruise at 40. But this wasn't a car without flaws. Cabin noise at higher revs bordered on obnoxious. The cabin trim was economy grade at best, and the lack of aggressive design meant even enthusiasts overlooked it, then and now. But that invisibility, that's exactly what made it dangerous. So here's a question for you. If you had to park one of these sleepers in your driveway, subtle outside, savage inside, would it be this understated Carina? Or does another car on this list speak louder in silence? Drop a comment and let me know. Number 19. 1971 Isuzu Florian 1600 SS. That Carina may have kept its fangs tucked away, but the next contender, it didn't even have teeth on paper until you found out how fast it could bite. The 1971 Isuzu Florian 1600 SS wasn't made to turn heads. It looked like a civil servant's car, something you'd find parked outside a bank manager's house or idling outside a tea shop. Square, upright, and deliberate. Nothing about it screamed performance. In fact, most didn't even realize Isuzu still made passenger cars in the early 70s, let alone one with sports ambitions. But hidden beneath that forgettable silhouette was a lightweight sedan tuned for spirited driving. The SS variant was equipped with a 1.6-liter G161S inline-4, fed by twin Mikuni Solex carburetors. It made around 115 horsepower, not a shocking number by today's standards, but in a body that barely tipped the scales over 2,200 pounds, it moved with surprising urgency. 0 to 60 came in under 10 seconds, and its tight 4-speed gearbox made it feel even punchier than its numbers suggested. Isuzu engineered the Florian 1600 SS with suspension geometry that wouldn't be out of place on a more serious performance platform. Double wishbones up front and a live axle in the rear, tuned for surprisingly sharp handling. It didn't roll over in corners like you'd expect from a sedan in this segment. And while most buyers were looking at the Florian for its practical charm, those who got the SS trim knew they were buying something rare and oddly rewarding. But the Florian 1600 SS had its compromises. The interior was stark, even by early 70s Japanese standards. Build quality was solid but unremarkable, and Isuzu's limited dealer network made parts a bit of a treasure hunt. It never caught fire in the public imagination, which meant it was outshone by flashier rivals before it ever got a chance. Still, that's the whole point. It didn't need flash to be quick. It just needed an open road, a driver who knew what they had, and maybe a Camaro at the next light to prove it against. Quiet, capable, criminally overlooked. The Florian 1600 SS wore a gray suit to work, but its weekend plans included humiliating cars twice its size. Number 18. 1972 Nissan Violet 160J SSS 710. If the Florian slipped under the radar with quiet confidence, the next car didn't even show up on most people's screens. And yet, it had one of the most underrated powertrains of the decade, dressed in total anonymity. The 1972 Nissan Violet 160 JSSS, also known internally as the 710, was Nissan's attempt to wedge performance into an economy box without anyone noticing. On the surface, this was the commuter special. Angular body, conservative trim, chrome just where it needed to be, and not a millimeter more. It looked like the kind of car you'd see a high school principal driving in 1975, clipboard in the back seat, briefcase in the trunk. Nothing sporty here, right? That's until you looked at the badge, SSS. That wasn't for decoration, it meant business. Under the hood sat the L16 engine, Nissan's venerable 1.6-liter inline-4, mated to twin SU carburetors and tuned to produce around 109 horsepower and 102 pound-feet of torque. In a car that weighed under a ton, that power felt brisk, especially paired with a close-ratio 4-speed manual and a surprisingly eager throttle response. The Violet's real strength was balance. Nissan engineers had done their homework, giving the 160 JSSS independent front suspension and a semi-trailing arm rear that, while not groundbreaking, handled tight corners with poise. This wasn't a car that felt like it was trying to be fast. It just was. Predictable, planted, and more rewarding the harder you pushed it. Most owners never found that limit, but those who didn't forget it. Still, there were trade-offs. The interior was basic. Vinyl and hard plastics dominated, and rust was a silent killer that took many 710S off the road before their engines had a chance to stretch their legs. The styling, while clean, was so understated it bordered on invisible. That's exactly what made it the perfect sleeper. It's easy to overlook the Violet 160J SSS, even now. But back in the early 70s, this was the kind of car that would shame a bigger sedan in a backroad brawl, and then drop your kids off at school without breaking a sweat. Quiet, tidy, fast. The sleeper formula, done right. Number 17. 1975 Toyota Corona RT100 2000 GT. If the 160J SSS was a lesson in how to disguise sharp handling, this next one was a masterclass in how to cloak raw punch beneath business-like formality. The 1975 Toyota Corona RT100 2000 GT wasn't the kind of car you'd expect to raise eyebrows. It looked like it belonged to a regional bank manager, parked dutifully outside a suburban office. Boxy, upright, dignified. A car built for punctuality and polite nods, not performance. And that's exactly what made it dangerous. Buried under that squared-off hood was Toyota's legendary 18RG engine, a 2.0-liter DOHC inline-4 co-developed with Yamaha. This dual-carb setup made a healthy 130 horsepower and 122 pound-feet of torque, numbers that might not sound explosive today, but were nothing to shrug at in the mid-70s, especially in a rear-wheel drive chassis that weighed around 1,100 kilograms and had well-sorted suspension for its time. With a close-ratio 5-speed manual available in some markets, the 2000 GT badge wasn't just for show. This was a car that could hustle 0 to 60 in under 10 seconds, fast enough to rattle any V6-wielding domestic cruiser caught sleeping at a red light. And unlike some of its sportier siblings, the RT100 didn't scream for attention. The grille was modest, the stance conservative, even the badging was small. Toyota knew what they were doing. That said, the Corona 2000 GT wasn't perfect. The ride leaned a little firm when pushed, and the recirculating ball steering didn't deliver the precision you'd get from a Celica. But in terms of sleeper DNA, this car had it all. It wore the suit and tie, but underneath, track shoes and a loaded gym bag. People often forget the RT100 because it lived in the shadow of flashier Toyotas. But for those in the know, it was the corporate assassin, a car that looked ready to file paperwork but ended up filing past everything in its class. And here's a thought. If Toyota made this their family sedan, what were they hiding in their true performance lineup? Number 16. 1970 Mitsubishi Colt Galant GTO MR. If the Corona RT100 was a tailored suit with knuckle dusters in the pocket, this next one was a school teacher by day, street fighter by night, no flashy sideburns, no rear spoiler, no raked stance. Just a sedan, a very, very fast one. At first glance, the 1970 Mitsubishi Colt Galant GTO MR was the sort of car you'd expect to see idling outside a clinic or ferrying accountants home from work. But the trick here? We're not talking about the coupe that usually hogs the attention. We're talking about the base Galant sedan, the true sleeper shell for the MR's mechanicals. Underneath the calm, formal body was Mitsubishi's most serious power plant at the time. The 1.6-liter Saturn engine in its twin carbureted DOHC form, making 125 horsepower and around 110 pound-feet of torque. In a body weighing just under 1,000 kilograms, it turned this upright commuter into a silent hunter. 0 to 60 in roughly 9.8 seconds, but with the kind of high-revving urgency you wouldn't expect from a Mitsubishi in 1970. Why the MR treatment in a sedan? Simple. Cost-cutting racers, discreet tuners, and family men with a rebellious streak didn't always want a sports coupe that shouted its intentions. They wanted something they could take to a client meeting or through a mountain pass at Redline. And despite its raw pace, the Galant sedan didn't fall apart under pressure. The rear-wheel drive chassis was tight, the 4-speed gearbox crisp, and the suspension surprisingly communicative for a car that looked like it should be doing milk runs. It was Japan's answer to the Ford Cortina GT, only with better balance and cleaner lines. It wasn't all roses. The brakes could fade under spirited driving, and parts support today can be thin. But back then, it was the kind of car that confused people. You'd see it parked next to a Corolla at the supermarket and never suspect it just carved up a canyon that morning. In a lineup full of showboats, this one played it cool. Sleeves rolled up, head down, and gone before you even realized it was quick. Number 15. 1976 Nissan Laurel 2000 SGX C130. You'd think a car with opera windows and chrome-lipped fenders was built more for ballads than burnout marks. But this next one, it had the moves of a fighter wearing a tux. The 1976 Nissan Laurel 2000 SGX, on the surface, was luxury first, aimed at executives who wanted a bit of prestige without making noise. With its long hood, clean C130 fastback profile, and plush interior, it looked like it belonged in a driveway next to a bonsai tree in a bottle of sake. But under all that velvet was a machine tuned to surprise. What gave it teeth was the L20ET, Nissan's robust inline-six with electronic fuel injection. Though in some trims, a twin-carb setup did the job just fine. This meant a healthy 130 to 140 horsepower, with torque hovering near 120 pound-feet. Doesn't sound wild on paper, but remember, this wasn't a heavy barge. Paired with a slick-shifting 5-speed manual and rear-wheel drive layout, the Laurel could quietly outrun quite a few more obvious performance cars of its era. Its 0 to 60 time clocked in the 9-second range, but the real performance was in the way it delivered it, silently with minimal fuss, like it had nothing to prove. A big part of that stealth was how balanced and smooth the chassis felt, thanks to Nissan's attention to suspension geometry and ride quality. It didn't wallow like a boat, it glided, then gripped when pushed. It wasn't perfect. Weight distribution wasn't ideal, and the luxurious trimmings could fool even the driver into forgetting the muscle beneath. But that's the charm. This was a sleeper in the purest sense, a grand tourer in sheep's clothing, moving with grace but hiding menace beneath. If you saw one parked outside a law office or gliding through traffic in late 70s Tokyo, you'd never expect it to be chasing Seleucus up the hills outside the city. But that's exactly what made it lethal. Understated, underestimated, unforgettable. Number 14. 1970 Toyota Publica Starlet KP30. It looked like something your grandmother might have driven to the post office. Small, boxy, harmless. But what if we told you this unassuming city runabout could give a bigger, pricier coupe a reason to sweat? The 1970 Toyota Publica Starlet KP30 came from humble beginnings. Born as part of Toyota's lightweight economy lineup, it was meant to be affordable, reliable, and easy to park on narrow Japanese streets. It had no aggressive body lines, no wide stance, and certainly no sports car attitude. Most buyers never gave it a second look. But underneath its modest skin, the KP30 had a wild card. The secret? It weighed almost nothing, just under 1,600 pounds. Now combine that with Toyota's high-revving 3KB engine, a 1.2-liter inline-4 pushing around 77 horsepower in twin-carb form. That might sound tame by today's numbers, but this was a flyweight with just enough punch to surprise bigger, more powerful cars. The KP30 could go from 0 to 60 in just over 10 seconds, which was brisk for a compact economy car at the time, especially one that didn't look the part. Its rear-wheel drive layout and nimble chassis made it a street sleeper favorite for Japanese tuners. You could throw it into corners with confidence, mod it quietly, and never raise suspicion. A lowered KP30 with performance carbs and stickier tires didn't just keep up with heavier sedans, it danced around them. But what really made the Starlet KP30 special wasn't just its potential, it was its invisibility. It looked too innocent to be taken seriously, which was exactly what made it dangerous. It didn't scream for attention. It just passed you before you even realized the light turned green. If sleeper cars are your thing, you're going to want to see how deep this list goes. And just wait till we hit the top 3. These are the ones that embarrass the big names without even breaking a sweat. Subscribe so you don't miss the machines no one ever saw coming. Number 13. 1973 Mazda Savana RX-3. It looked like a family car, and that's exactly what it was supposed to be. 4 doors, modest chrome, a silhouette that blended into every 1970s Japanese neighborhood. But beneath all that normalcy, one of the most explosive secrets of the decade. The 1973 Mazda Savana RX-3 sedan didn't wear its performance on its sleeve. It wasn't a coupe flaunting wide fenders or spoilers. It was the version you bought when you had kids to drop off or groceries to haul. But Mazda knew exactly what it was doing. Under the hood lived the 12A rotary engine, a screaming little 1.1-liter Wankel unit that, while tiny in displacement, punched far above its class. It delivered about 110 horsepower, but it wasn't just the raw number. It was how the power came on. Smooth, high revving, and completely unlike anything else on the road. Thanks to the car's lightweight construction and responsive chassis, the RX-3 sedan could hit 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 10 seconds, making it faster than plenty of V6 sedans twice its size. And the beauty, nobody expected it. It didn't roar, it didn't advertise, it just went. And while the coupe version often steals the spotlight in collector circles, it's the sedan, yes, the family-friendly version, that truly embodies the sleeper ethos. The kind of car you'd park at a PTA meeting, then blast down a mountain pass on the way home. Mazda even had it campaigning in touring car races under the radar, going wheel to wheel with cars that had no idea this little sedan packed such venom. It was a David in a world full of Goliaths, and it had the rev range to prove it. Now here's the question. Do you think a rotary-powered 4-door could hold its own against the big-name muscle cars of the era in a straight line in the corners? Drop a comment and let me know. Number 12. 1971 Datsun Sunny 1200 GX. You'd probably see one parked crooked outside a grocery store, half-faded paint, a child seat in the back, and think nothing of it. But this unassuming little runabout, it had enough spirit to embarrass far more serious metal, quietly. The 1971 Datsun Sunny 1200 GX, part of the B110 series, was Japan's answer to affordable motoring. It looked harmless, soft lines, upright posture, tiny steel wheels, and a front grille that seemed too polite to overtake anything. But this GX trim, that's where the twist comes in. Tucked under the hood was the A12 1.2-liter inline-4, a featherweight engine putting out around 83 horsepower. Which doesn't sound like much until you realize the entire car only weighed about 760 kilograms, 1,675 pounds. The power-to-weight ratio turned this economy car into something shockingly spry. With a close ratio 4-speed manual and Datsun's sharp gear engagement, the Sunny GX had enough bite to surprise larger 1.6-liter or even 2.0-liter sedans at traffic lights. It could sprint to 60 miles per hour in just over 12 seconds. Respectable for the era, especially given how much faster it felt behind the wheel. What made it even more dangerous was how unsuspicious it looked. No spoilers, no scoops, no sporty cues aside from a few discreet GX badges and some side stripes that most people mistook for dealer options. It was the perfect recipe for a sleeper. Practical, efficient, and just raw enough to spark grins for the right driver. Sure, it lacked the refinement of bigger competitors. Ride quality was firm, and highway speeds made the cabin sound like a tin box full of bees. But on tight city roads and twisty back lanes, it danced. This wasn't about brute force. It was about momentum, control, and the joy of squeezing every ounce of performance from a car most people never gave a second look. In a world full of overhyped badges and chromed-out illusions, the Sunny 1200 GX was the quiet rebel. It asked for nothing, but gave everything to the driver who understood it. Number 11. 1973 Toyota Corolla 11 TE27. Imagine this. You're in a car that looks like it belongs in your grandmother's driveway, maybe parked next to the garden tools. Yet, at the next light, you shock the hell out of a muscle car. Sounds impossible? The 1973 Toyota Corolla, Levin TE27, disguised as a humble four-door Corolla. This unassuming sedan was a true sleeper, a David ready to take on Goliath and win. The TE27 may have looked like just another economy car, but it was built to defy expectations. Under the hood, it packed a spirited 1.6-liter 2TG engine, delivering around 115 horsepower. Not a monster on paper, but combined with its lightweight chassis and sharp suspension, it turned into a nimble and fierce competitor. The Levin wasn't about blazing straight-line speed. It was about ripping through tight corners and darting through city streets with precision. It could outhandle much bigger, more powerful muscle cars, making it the ultimate urban sleeper. 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 9 seconds wasn't world-shattering, but in 1973, it was enough to leave most sedans in the dust. This little Toyota didn't need flashy spoilers or bulging wheel arches to make its mark. It was the stealthy king of its class, hiding in plain sight. Most drivers never realized it was more than just a practical daily driver. But if you were lucky enough to own one and really push it, you knew it had the heart of a lion. Forget the cars that looked fast. The Corolla Levin TE27 had its own secret weapon. Confidence wrapped in a compact, unassuming package. And it wasn't just about speed, it was about the pure joy of driving a car that the world overlooked until it was too late. Number 10. 1971 Toyota Corona Mark II 1900 SL. Starting with a car that many would mistake for nothing more than a sensible family runabout. The 1971 Toyota Corona Mark II 1900 SL. At first glance, it's easy to see why it blends into the background. The Mark II was designed to be a step up from the regular Corona, aimed at families who wanted just a bit more comfort without flashing their ambitions. But beneath its modest, clean-cut lines sat a surprisingly capable machine. The 1900 SL variant packed the sturdy 1.9-liter 8R inline-4 engine, delivering around 105 horsepower and 104 pound-feet of torque. Not huge numbers on paper, but in the early 70s, it was enough to make this family sedan feel lively, especially in city traffic. Acceleration from 0 to 60 miles per hour took just under 13 seconds. Not blistering, but quick enough to surprise unsuspecting drivers at the lights. More importantly, it delivered this performance with Toyota's trademark reliability. The SL trim added subtle but effective refinements, improved suspension tuning for better road manners, and a more comfortable, well-appointed interior. Long drives became genuinely enjoyable, as the Mark II cruised smoothly without fuss. Of course, it wasn't perfect. The car's weight and conservative gearing meant it never quite felt like a full-blooded sports machine. And its quiet looks, while great for stealth, made it easy to overlook next to flashier rivals. But that's exactly why it deserves its spot here. The Mark II 1900 SL thrived in plain sight, hiding its true potential behind an air of quiet confidence. Number 9, 1974, Nissan Bluebird 610 SSS. After the understated charm of the Mark II, the next sleeper takes things in a slightly sportier, but still surprisingly discreet direction. The 1974 Nissan Bluebird 610 SSS. On the surface, the Bluebird looked like any typical commuter car of its time. Conservative lines, modest proportions, and the kind of everyday styling that wouldn't raise an eyebrow in traffic. But Nissan had something clever in mind for the SSS trim. The Bluebird 610 marked a shift in Nissan's design language, aiming for international appeal while still keeping things simple. The SSS, short for Super Sports Sedan, quietly slipped performance touches into what most assumed was a practical family car. Under the hood sat the 1.6-liter L16 inline-4 engine, fitted with twin Hitachi SU carburetors, producing around 109 horsepower and 101 pound-feet of torque. With a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of approximately 11.5 seconds, it wasn't blistering, but it was quick enough to surprise unsuspecting rivals. Sportier suspension tuning and tighter steering gave the SSS a nimble character, making twisty back roads genuinely enjoyable. What really worked in the SSS's favor was its balance. It managed to feel engaging without trying too hard, a quality that only a few cars of that era truly captured. Of course, it wasn't perfect. Some drivers found the handling a bit soft at the limit, and its styling, while clean, perhaps leaned too conservative to ever earn instant recognition. Still, that quiet nature is exactly why it earns its place here. The SSS didn't need to scream to be quick. It simply kept its strengths tucked just below the surface. Number 8. 1975 Mitsubishi Galant GTO 2000 GSR. Following the understated Bluebird SSS, we now step into something that looked like it might be all show, but in truth was hiding a lot more muscle than most gave it credit for. The 1975 Mitsubishi Galant GTO 2000 GSR. At first glance, the GTO wore styling cues borrowed straight from American muscle cars, with a long hood, fastback silhouette, and aggressive lines. It looked like it wanted to run with the big boys, but many dismissed it as just another sporty-looking coupe without much substance. They couldn't have been more wrong. Mitsubishi developed the Galant GTO to capture the growing enthusiasm for performance coupes, and the GSR trim was their boldest attempt yet. Under the hood sat a 2.0-liter Saturn inline-4 engine with twin Mikuni Solex carburetors, producing around 125 horsepower and 130 pound-feet of torque. This setup propelled the GSR from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 9.7 seconds. Quick for its time, especially considering its sub-1,000 kilogram, about 2,200 pound weight. The GSR also benefited from firmer suspension, front disc brakes, and a close ratio 5-speed manual gearbox, giving it real composure when pushed hard through tight corners. But the GTO 2000 GSR wasn't flawless. Its performance was sharp, but the ride could feel harsh over rough surfaces, and despite its punchy character, it struggled to fully shake off the perception of being style over substance. Yet that underestimation worked in its favor. Most never suspected it had genuine bite to match its bark. And just when you think the list is settling into coupes and sedans, the next car takes us somewhere completely unexpected. A low-key Grand Tourer from Mazda with an engine unlike anything else on the road. Number 7. 1977 Isuzu 117 Coupe XC. Coming off the bold attitude of the Galant GTO, our next car takes a completely different path. More refined, almost artistic, yet quietly potent under the surface. Meet the 1977 Isuzu 117 Coupe XC. Unlike many of its Japanese contemporaries, the 117 Coupe wasn't born from the pursuit of raw performance alone. Designed by the legendary Giorgetto Giugiaro, it carried a sleek European flair, standing out with elegance rather than aggression. Isuzu positioned the 117 Coupe as a premium sports coupe, aiming for a balance of style, comfort, and surprising capability. The XC variant came late in the model's run and featured a 1.8-liter DOHC inline-4 with fuel injection, producing around 130 horsepower and 123 pound-feet of torque. Thanks to this setup, the car managed a respectable 0 to 60 miles per hour time of about 9.5 seconds. Not blistering, but certainly enough to catch unsuspecting drivers off guard. What truly elevated the 117 XC was its composure. Precise steering, well-tuned suspension, and an upscale interior with leather seats, wood trim, and sharp instrumentation that put it leagues ahead of typical 1970s Japanese cabins. Of course, there were trade-offs. The 117 Coupe XC carried extra weight due to its luxury touches, slightly dulling its edge compared to more focused sports coupes. And its premium price tag kept it rare on the streets, but that rarity only amplifies its sleeper appeal. Stick around. Next up is a car that took rugged practicality and quietly turned it into unexpected speed. Think the 70s had hidden heat? Wait till you see what Japan snuck into the streets in the 80s. So don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's next. Number 6. 1973 Mazda Loose Rotary Coupe. From the elegance of the Isuzu 117 Coupe, we move to something far more experimental, yet just as discreet. The 1973 Mazda Loose Rotary Coupe was Mazda's quiet rebellion against convention. While most automakers were fine-tuning pistons and valves, Mazda was fully committed to the rotary revolution. Designed by Bertone, the Loose Coupe carried itself with understated class, yet under the hood it was anything but ordinary. At its heart was the 12A rotary engine, a compact twin-rotor unit producing around 130 horsepower and 115 pound-feet of torque. torque. While those numbers might seem modest on paper, the lightweight design and free revving nature of the rotary allowed the Luce to sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 9.8 seconds. Perfectly respectable for its era and enough to surprise drivers expecting nothing more than a casual cruiser. The Luce delivered smooth, linear acceleration that made it feel eager at any speed, while its composed ride quality and supple suspension tuning made it genuinely comfortable over long distances. What truly set the Luce apart was this seamless blend of refined aesthetics and unexpected energy. It was a car that rewarded spirited driving without demanding attention. But of course, the rotary dream wasn't without compromise. The Luce struggled with thirsty fuel consumption, especially during the oil crisis, and early rotary reliability quirks kept owners on their toes. Still, for those willing to embrace its quirks, it offered a driving experience that felt futuristic and bold. But don't get too comfortable. Next, we're shifting gears to a car that disguised its muscle under the plainest of suits, and you're not going to want to miss it. Number 5. 1971 Prince Skyline GC10 2000 GT non-GTR. Sliding over from the quirky brilliance of the Mazda Luce rotary coupe, we land on a car that often lives in the shadow of its more famous sibling. The 1971 Prince Skyline GC10 2000 GT, not the fire-breathing GTR, but the understated 2000 GT variant, carried a legacy that quietly ran deep. Before the Skyline name became a global performance icon, it was Prince Motor Company's answer to European touring cars. Even after merging with Nissan, this car kept that spirit alive in its subtler form. Under the hood, the GC10 2000 GT packed the L20A 2.0-liter inline-six engine, producing about 115 horsepower and 116 pound-feet of torque. Thanks to its relatively lightweight and smooth power delivery, it could hit 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 11 seconds. Not blistering, but quick enough to surprise in stoplight duels. The engine's linear response and silky refinement made it a joy to wind through the gears, while its balanced chassis delivered a composed ride that suited both everyday driving and the occasional backroad blast. Visually, it played it cool. Without the aggressive flares or racing stripes of the GTR, the 2000 GT kept things understated with clean lines, subtle chrome accents, and a family sedan silhouette that let it fly under the radar. Sure, it lacked the hardcore tuning and sharp handling of its GTR sibling, keeping it out of the purist's spotlight, but that's exactly what makes it so charming. A stealthy performer that leaves people guessing. Drop a comment and let me know. Legendary badge or sleeper appeal? And don't go anywhere, because the number 1 car is a sleek machine from a brand you might not expect in this lineup. Number 4, 1976 Toyota Crown Coupe MS112. Moving on from the subtle sharpness of the Prince Skyline GC10 2000 GT, we arrive at something a bit more unexpected, the 1976 Toyota Crown Coupe MS112. Most people hear Crown and instantly think of plush sedans built for luxury, not performance. But this coupe version quietly flipped the script. Toyota, known for its conservative approach, decided to stretch its legs a little, wrapping executive-level comfort around a surprisingly capable powertrain. The result was something that flew under the radar. While the sedan Crown targeted high-end clientele, this coupe offered a glimpse into what happens when luxury meets a little more edge. Beneath that stately design sat the 4M 2.6-liter straight-six engine, producing around 140 horsepower and 156 pound-feet of torque. That power was channeled through a 4-speed automatic or optional manual, giving the Crown Coupe respectable pace for its size. 0 to 60 miles per hour came in roughly 10.5 seconds. Not blistering, but quick enough to catch people off guard, especially in such a dignified package. The smooth power delivery and ample torque at low RPMs made it feel effortlessly strong on open roads. What made it fascinating was how it blended full-size luxury with sleeper potential. Soft suspension and rich interiors kept the ride refined, but a confident throttle push revealed its hidden muscle. Of course, the weight of that luxury meant it wasn't as agile as some smaller contemporaries, and fuel economy was less than stellar. But charm like this isn't always about numbers. Stick around. Our next car is a quirky two-door from a brand that's been quietly building sleepers for decades. And if you're enjoying this cruise through Japan's under-the-radar legends, smash that subscribe button. The top picks are just around the corner, and they're going to catch you completely off guard. Stay tuned. Number 3, 1973 Nissan Cedric 2600 GL. After the refined luxury of the Toyota Crown Coupe MS112, let's shift gears to something even more under the radar. the 1973 Nissan Cedric 2600 GL. At first glance, it might seem like just another unremarkable midsize sedan, blending quietly into the background with its conservative lines and formal design language. But beneath its understated exterior, the Cedric 2600 GL hid respectable performance credentials that made it far more than just a family commuter. Nissan at the time was focused on building reliable, comfortable cars, and the Cedric embodied this philosophy while still offering a subtle dash of excitement for those who cared to look closer. Under the hood, the Cedric 6000 GL packed the L26 2.6-liter inline-six engine, producing around 140 horsepower and 152 pound-feet of torque. Paired with either a smooth-shifting 3-speed automatic or an optional manual transmission, it could quietly hustle from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 11 seconds. Not groundbreaking, but genuinely respectable for a mid-sized executive sedan of its era. The engine's smooth power delivery and ample low-end torque made it a relaxed highway cruiser, yet surprisingly eager when pushed. Its handling, too, defied expectations. Despite its size and comfort-focused design, the Cedric offered a composed and confident driving experience, with steering that felt precise enough to inspire trust on winding roads. Step inside, and Cedric continued to impress. The cabin featured plush, generously padded seats, soft-touch materials, and a thoughtfully arranged dashboard that gave off a premium vibe, especially compared to many of its domestic rivals. It was a car built for comfort over flash, making long journeys effortless and pleasant. The attention to ride quality and interior refinement made it feel like a true executive car, even if it wasn't marketed as one. Of course, it wasn't without its drawbacks. The Cedric's substantial weight meant it felt sluggish when cornering enthusiastically, and its fuel economy, averaging around 15 miles per gallon, was far from efficient. But for those in the know, the Cedric 2600 GL was a true sleeper, a quiet performer that delivered far more than its humble appearance suggested. But wait until you see the game changers Japan unleashed in the 90s. Make sure you subscribe so you're first in line for more under-the-radar classics coming your way. Number 2, 1977 Toyota Mark II Coupe. Moving away from the understated charm of the Nissan Cedric, we now look at a car that set the stage for one of Toyota's most beloved platforms, the 1977 Toyota Mark II Coupe GX61 precursor MX28. This car, though not widely known, had a lasting influence, laying the groundwork for future Mark II models that became staples of Toyota's lineup. The 1977 Coupe was a perfect mix of elegance and subtlety, combining a refined design with the performance chops of its era. Under the hood, the Cedric 6000 GL packed the L26 2.6-liter inline-six engine, producing 140 horsepower and 152 pound-feet of torque. Paired with a 3-speed automatic or manual transmission, it could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 11 seconds. Not blistering, but respectable for its time. While the car wasn't going to win any races, it had just enough torque and agility to offer a thrilling experience on the open road. Toyota, known for its reliability, delivered a surprisingly smooth ride with this model, making it a perfect option for those who didn't want to draw attention but still craved a bit of performance behind the wheel. However, this isn't to say it was perfect. The car's rear suspension system could sometimes leave much to be desired in terms of handling, and while it had plenty of power for its size, it wasn't exactly the fastest car in its class. Still, there's something about the understated appeal of this model that made it a standout, a true sleeper for those in the know. What do you think about this sleeper? Could the Mark II Coupe have been a bigger hit if it had more power? Drop a comment and let me know. Number 1, 1972 Mazda Capella Rotary GS RX2. After the understated yet powerful 1977 Toyota Mark II Coupe, we finally come to the last car on the list, the 1972 Mazda Capella Rotary GS RX2. A car that blends the innovation of the iconic rotary engine with a package that flew under the radar for many. Released at the height of the 1970s, the RX-2 was Mazda's first major attempt to bring the rotary engine to a broader market, and it did so with style. While the RX-2 might not have screamed performance at first glance, its compact yet sporty proportions hinted at the excitement waiting under the hood. The Capella Rotary GS featured Mazda's revolutionary 12A Wankel rotary engine, producing around 130 horsepower and 114 pound-feet of torque. Impressive numbers for a car that weighed just over 2,200 pounds, about 1,000 kilograms. Thanks to the rotary's naturally high revving character, it could spin freely past 7,000 RPM, delivering a smooth surge of power that felt much livelier than its horsepower rating suggested. The RX-2 could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just under 9 seconds, a respectable feat that placed it alongside much pricier sports sedans of the era. Its handling was another highlight, with independent front suspension, rear live axle with leaf springs, and front disc brakes, fairly advanced for its class at the time. The RX-2 offered sharp and responsive driving dynamics. Whether carving corners or cruising at highway speeds, it maintained a level of poise that caught many drivers by surprise. The lightweight construction amplified this agility, making the RX-2 a genuine backroad hero. Inside, while the interior was fairly minimalistic, it had a purposeful, driver-focused layout. Clear instrumentation, a sporty 3-spoke steering wheel, and bucket seats kept you connected to the driving experience. Optional extras included a wood-trimmed dash and sporty touches that gave it a bit more character than its understated exterior would suggest. However, not everything about the RX-2 was perfect. The rotary engine, while exhilarating, came with compromises. Fuel efficiency hovered around 15 to 18 miles per gallon, US. Not great, even by 1970 standards. Maintenance was also a point of caution. Rotary engines required careful upkeep, especially around apex seals, which were known to wear prematurely if not maintained properly. Additionally, the cabin, though functional, lacked some of the refinement and creature comforts found in its competitors. Still, these quirks only add to the RX-2's charm. Today, it's a sought-after collector's item among rotary enthusiasts, and back then, it was a true sleeper, a family sedan that could leave muscle cars blinking at stoplights. For Mazda, the RX-2 was a bold statement that helped cement their rotary legacy, paving the way for legends like the RX-3, RX-7, and beyond. Which of these sleepers caught you off guard? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious which one surprised you the most. And if you're loving this dive into Japan's forgotten powerhouses, smash that like button and subscribe. The next chapter is even crazier, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Catch you in the next one.